Hello guys, welcome to another session. In this session we are going to look into functions in Python. So let's look into the topic. What are the topics we are going to cover in this session? So in this session we are going to look into the following topics. So we will look into what actually functions is, then how function works, then we will understand that how many types of functions we have. After that we will look into the syntax to define a function within Python. Then we will understand about the returning values from function, and we will also look into the function's parameter and arguments. And we will do all this with the help of exercises. We will do some exercises over here. We will design some function and we are going to write some calculator program that contains four functions like addition, subtraction, division and multiplication. So we will design that function. In the last session, we have shown you the flowchart about the calculator program. So we are going to implement in this session. Now let's understand the functions. So what is function? So basically functions can be defined one place and called or invoked by other function. So what is the benefit of writing a function? So actually function will help us to provide the modularity within the program. So whenever the size of the program is getting increased, we will chunk it into a smaller functions so that it would be really easy to maintain, easy to write, and we will particularly focus about the functionality within the program. So if you go by formal definition, let's look into that. So this is the same thing which I have explained you in Python. Functions are groups of related statements that can be called together that typically perform a specific task and which may or may not take a set of parameter or return a value. So this we will discuss further in detail about, so don't confuse about these terms like parameters, returning a value. We will look into that when we will discuss about returning values from function in the same session. The another beauty of the function is that you can write it once and whenever you want to use it, you can call that function and you can use it. We will look into our project where we will write the functions once and we will call it many times whenever we want. So this is one of the beauty of the function. So now we have understand that what function is. We will look into how actually functions will work. So let's look into one of the diagram and then we understand that how actually functions works. So let's jump into the diagram. So let's look into this diagram. So here actually it is representing that we have defined a function with a name called function underscore name, and it is doing some functionality. And here within the program, it is here we are calling many times. First, when we are using it here at the first statement, you can find that we are calling it functions underscore name. So and second we are also calling function underscore name. So what actually it is representing in this diagram? So basically each time the call is made to the function, the program flow jumps to that particular function. Each time this function is being called, then it will jump to this function body and perform the activities and perform the task which is being defined within this function. And once the execution of this function is being completed, then it again return back to that particular location of the program. So this is the way how functions work. Now let's jump into other topic. What is the topic? We will look into that. So now we have understand that what is function is. We will move further and we will look into types of function. So how many types of functions we have? So basically two types we have. So for one is the built-in function within Python, like print function we have been using from very long. Then we have used input function. So these are the functions is built-in function. So Python is offering some of the functions by default. Whenever you are installing Python, then they are offering some built-in function which is performing some activities like print. If you are writing print and you are writing some message or some value you want to print, then print is printing those things. That program, the print program, is performing their activity. So we haven't written it, so it is by default. When we have installed Python, it is coming with Python, so that is called built-in function. The other type of function is user defined function. when we do some exercises in this session, then we write some user defined function for our program. We are going to design a calculator program, and within that we will write the user defined functions for addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. Now we understand that types of function. We will look into the syntax, how to write functions. So the syntax is pretty much straightforward, where we can use a keyword called def and the name of the function you should write, and here the parameter list. So what does parameter means? So basically, sometime whenever we want to call a function and we want to pass some value, on the basis of that value the statement will be executed. For example, if we want to add two numbers, so we are going to pass two numbers, number 1 and number 2, and then we perform some operation like addition. So that number will be passed over here, and that number is called parameter. We will look into in more detail when we do the exercises. So let's look into this. For example, or this function is not contain any parameter. It is a simple function which is doing a printing of a hello world. So how does function with parameter will look like? So it will look like, here we are printing a static message called hello world, but suppose that if we want to print the message we will pass by calling this function, it will print that message. So this is a parameterized function. Now once we understand that, let's move further. So what is returning value from function? So basically what will happen that whenever you call a function, so it performs some activity or it performs some task and it returns some result. That result we want to use it. So on that time the function will return the value and which will be assigned to the variable which called it. We will look in one of the example how we are going to use returning value from functions. If you are not understanding with the definition, that is perfectly fine. When we do exercises in this session, you will understand it. Now let's look into the other topic, function parameter and argument. So these are the things I will explain you in example. So let's jump into the Spider terminal, and first we will create a program called calculator, and then we will create the functions for different operations, and then I will explain you all these terms if you are having any confusion. So let's jump into the Spider terminal. So here we need to write a program for calculator. So for that we are going to first define a function for addition, add, and which contains two values. For example, we are going to tell that A and B, or say input 1 and input 2, and here we are performing two tasks. Here we are performing a addition, so we are going to return input 1 plus input 2. So this is the simple function we have defined. If you look into this function contains two parameters, input 1 and input 2. We will look into that how to call this function. So let me first define it and then we will discuss about all the thing which we have discussed so far. Now we will copy paste it, we will define other function. So basically our calculator contains addition, subtraction, multiply and division. So here you need to do minus operation, and here you need to do multiplication operation, and here you need to do division operation. So this is the thing which you have defined over here. Now you want to call this function. So how to call it? For example, if you want to perform addition, so you will call it add. Now here you will call addition. Suppose that if you want to addition, and here you are going to pass the argument. So for example, you want to add two value, 2 plus 3. So what it will do? It will return. So how it will work now? Let's understand it. Now we are calling the addition function and passing this value. So what this value is called? So let's understand now. So here we are talking about the parameters. The first statement we talked about parameters. So what is parameter into a function? So parameter here, when we are defining a function, we are telling that we are going to use two values. input 1 and input 2. The input 1 and input 2 is called parameter of function. Now moving further, another definition, what is argument? So whenever we are calling this function and we are passing the actual value, so this actual value is called argument. Clear? Okay. So moving further. Now I am going to print the add. So let's look into that. First, you should select completely and shift enter. Now it came into the memory. Now you will run it, shift enter, then it will return 5. So see here we have defined a function called addition and we are calling this function by passing the argument within the function, and when it is going over here, it is doing the addition and returning the result over here. Same way we can use subtraction. So let's look into that. Subtract, and here we are going to use subtraction. You can write subtraction and we are going to pass 3, 2 and we will print the value subtract. Now once we understand it, now we will do the same thing for multiply, and here we will call the multiply function, and here we will pass the value 3, 3, 2 value we have passed, and then we will print it. So multi. Now we will use the division, divide, and here we will call the division function and we will pass the value, and now here we will print it, divide. Now if you will run it, suppose if you are running all these functions, then it will return. See here, first what it will, it has done the addition of these two numbers which we passed as an argument, and it accepted that value, and then it added that value, and when we call it, after doing this operation, it returned it. So this is what we have explained over here, that whenever we are calling a function, how functions work. So this is what we have explained it. When a function is called, the flow of a control program jumps from where the function was called to the point where the function was defined. The body of the function is then executed before control return back to where it was called from. So this is what it is telling, that what is happening, that here we are calling this function, it performed the activity whatever we have told that, and once it performed that activity, it returned the result to the program from where we have called it. So this is what the definition is telling. Now whatever we have written over here, that is a user defined function, and the print is a built-in function. Now moving further, we have understand parameter, argument. Now what is multi-parameter function? So the thing which we are using over here, if you go here, we are passing two values, two parameters. So this is called multi-parameters. Some function accept single parameter, but here we are going to use, we are creating a calculator, we are using multiple parameters. So this is what it is telling. Now moving further, we will look into default parameter values. So what it is, sometime we need to pass the default value. For example, let's look into that. This is interesting. So suppose if you have an input value, and if I don't want to pass any value, and input 2 equal to 5, and suppose if I am not passing the value over here, a single argument I am going to pass. If I will run it, I can either use like this. So see here, it has a default value. So this is what it is referring that. So what it is telling, that default parameter value. If we don't pass any value within the function, then it will consider that number 5 is the default value. If suppose if we pass it like 7, then it will accept the 7. So now you again run it. See here, it has accepted the number 7 and added with 2, and then it returned the result. Once it is being done, now move further and understand the other definition. Now we have understand the default parameter value. Now let's look into the named argument. So what is named argument? Let's look into that. So basically, see, in the same context, we have defined the named parameter. Same way, we can define named argument. For example, if we are calling this addition, we can call it input equal to input 1 equal to 2 and input 2 equal to 7. So here we are exclusively telling that we are going to pass the value 2 to input 1 and 7 to the input 2. So in this case it is called named argument. So what is the benefit out of it? So if you are not passing the named argument, then you should pass in the order. For example, if you are passing the input 1 should go to the input 1 only. But suppose that if you want to change the order and you want to pass input 2 value first, then you need to use named argument. For example, if you are using input 2 and I want that input 2 should go first and then input 1 I want to send. Input 1 equal to 2. So in that case, what will happen if you will run? In that case, it executed. It is very handy when there are huge number of parameters within the functions. When we are designing some data analysis or data science algorithm, or when we are designing neural networks, on that time neural network has so many parameters. So that means we need to pass the argument for those parameters. On that time we don't know the order for which parameter we are passing the value. In that scenario, we use this named argument or named parameter. When we are defining the default value for the named parameter, then we are using named parameter, and when we are passing the value for those parameter, we are using named argument. So remember that. If this example doesn't making sense for you, that's fine, because it is in a small example. But if we have more number of arguments, when we want to pass the argument without following the order, then that time we are going to use named argument. So remember that. Now moving further, so let's look into that. So arbitrary arguments, what does it means? So let's look into an example. Now this is very interesting. A calculator. So here a calculator is not only limited to two inputs. Suppose that if you want to add, and if you want to add more than two input, and how many number of input if we will pass to the function, it will accept it. So just an example so that you will understand it. For example, I am defining another function for multi-value addition, multi-addition. That means it contains n number of argument, and here we are passing args. Now we will define here that. So here I have designed a function which contains arbitrary argument. So how do we define arbitrary argument? So arbitrary argument, first we understand that what is arbitrary argument. So as our calculator was very limited earlier with two inputs, we pass only two input and we will do the addition. But this is not the actual case of calculator. We want n number of argument. I want to add more than 2 digits or more than 3 or n number of calculation I want to do. So how do we can achieve it? Either we can define, we don't know how many number we are going to pass it. So Python offers a arbitrary argument in the form of like this, where we are going to represent arbitrary argument with the asterisk args. So what it means, we don't know the argument, we are going to use, or we are going to pass n number of argument in this function, and then afterwards I want to add it. So here what I am doing, I have written this function. So over here what I am doing, I am going to add all the value which is coming in this argument, which we don't know when how many argument we are going to pass it. Whatever the argument we will pass it over here, that needs to be iterated. We have seen the loop, how to do looping in Python. So we are going to grab this argument and we will iterate it. And here what we are doing, we are doing the same operation. If you remember that I told you, total equal to total plus I. This is the same operation we are doing, but it is a shorter version, so that the reason I'm using it. And then afterwards, once it is being iterated, it added all those value, and then it is returning. So let's look into how we are going to do that. For example, we are going to use multi addition, and here for example add n value, something like that, and here multi addition, and here we are going to pass 2 3 4 5 6, how many number of value you want to pass it, you can pass. And now first you have to save so that it will be loaded into memory, and now you will run it. We need to print it, sorry for that, we need to print the value, add n value. Now it will give us the return result. So 35. Suppose you want to add another number 9, again you will run it, it will accept that number. So this is called arbitrary argument. So this is the way, if we don't know how many of argument we are going to pass within the function, so Python offers something called arbitrary argument. So now we have seen that arbitrary argument. So let's move further and look into the positional and keyword argument. So guys, this is going to be a little tricky. You have to understand that something like this. We have something called positional and keyword arguments. So this is one of the way by which we can define functions. So when it is very helpful, when we don't know exactly how many of either position or keywords argument are going to be provided. So in that scenario, we are going to use positional and keywords argument. So how do we define it? So let's look into the example now. So this time I'm going to explain with other example. So positional and keyword argument will suits in that example. So first understand that how to define it. So to define it, there is a specific way we can define it. We need to use keyword def, the name of the function, and here you need to define double asterisk and use this one KW stand for keyword, ARGS stand for argument. So that means it is going to be arbitrary number of keyword arguments we are going to pass. That is going to be like a dictionary. So now suppose that if we passed it, so and we want to print it, all the keys, whatever the keys we are going to get over here. So this KWARGS has a value called, something called keys, and this is a method within KWARGS. So you should remember it whenever we are using positional keyword argument, then we use KWARGS. You should remember it. Now we will print those argument which we are going to pass, and that argument is the key which we are iterating now, and this key has some value. So we will print that value which we will pass in the form of key value pair, and that value is going to be here. We are going to grab that ARGS, and here you need to get the value with the help of this syntax. So you should remember it. Now how do we are going to use this function? We will use it like this. First shift enter, now named, and here we are passing, we don't know how many argument we are going to pass. So here a equal to 1, b equal to 2, c equal to 4 or 3. Now you will run it, and here we will print. Here we are printing already, so you can print it. So this is the way it is extracting the value from the positional and keyword argument. Now suppose if you want to call it again, and this time you want to pass 5 values. Instead of 3, you want to pass 5 values. D equal to 4, E equal to 5. So this is A is the key which we are extracting, and this is the way we are extracting this value. Now you will run it again. So it will print 5 values. So you can do it for any number of arguments, keyword arguments, and this is called keyword arguments. So how do we represent keyword argument in Python? With the help of double asterisk and something called kwargs, which we are passing over here, and kwargs is actually expose a method dot keys. With the help of that, we are actually iterating that keys and the value we are grabbing with from that key. I know this session is going to be little long, but I want to cover as much as possible with all the functions concept, because it is really important. So that's the reason I wanted to cover. So we are at almost end of the session, so let's look into the topic. What topic which is being remaining now, we have understand it. Now anonymous function, this is really important, so let's understand it. Sometime we want to create a function on a fly without a name. So what does it mean? So let's look into that. So basically Python offers to create an anonymous function on a fly. So let's look into that, how to create an anonymous function within Python. Let's jump into the editor first. So an anonymous function is being created with the help of keyword lambda. So how to do that? For example, I want to create a function which will double the value. So here I will use double, and the keyword we are going to use to create an anonymous function is called lambda. You should remember it. Lambda I into I. This is the example. Now if I want to double the value, how I can use it? Print double, and we will pass whatever value we want to pass. We will run it. Now we are going to use this lambda function, so it will return that double value. So here we haven't defined this function like the way function is being defined within the Python. So instead of that, we have used the keyword lambda, and here we are not defining any name. So what it is doing, it is performing the action without any name, and then it is assigning the value to this variable double, and whenever we are calling this double variable, so it is executing it. So this is what anonymous function work in Python. So anonymous function doesn't have any name. See here, we are not having any name over here. So to create an anonymous function in Python, we are going to use lambda keyword. So you should remember it. And then whatever the operations which we want to do, we can need to pass it. So basically this is the syntax: lambda, arguments, and the expression. So you should remember that this is the syntax you have to follow. So what we are doing, we are following the same thing. We have used lambda, argument is I, and the expression we want to do. So that's it guys, this is what I wanted to explain you in the entire functions module or function session. I hope I have covered all the things, but if in case if you have any question, you can drop me your question on my Twitter handle. That's it for this session. See you in the next session. Bye bye.